What if I told you? The money in your wallet isn't really money. That every dollar, euro, or yen in circulation was born, not from gold or trade or labor, but from debt. And that a small group of financial engineers working quietly behind closed doors over the last century designed a system that could create infinite wealth, but only for those who knew how it worked. This isn't a theory, it's history, hidden in plain sight. Today we are pulling back the curtain on the secret architects behind the world's infinite money supply, and how their creation reshaped everything: governments, wars, economies, and even your daily life. Because once you understand how money is truly made, you'll never see a price tag or a paycheck the same way again. To understand how we ended up here, we have to rewind back to the late 19th century. Before digital transactions, derivatives, and central banks printing trillions, money was something real. Gold coins, silver bars, tangible assets that governments couldn't simply invent. But this physical system had limits. Gold couldn't be printed on demand, and wars or economic ambition required flexibility. Enter the bankers. In the late 1800s, a handful of powerful banking families, names like Rothschild, Morgan, and Rockefeller, began influencing governments to adopt a more modern system. The promise? Stability, efficiency, and growth. The reality? Control. The first major step came in 1913. In the US, a secret meeting took place on Jekyll Island. Yes, an actual private island off the coast of Georgia. 7 men representing roughly 1/4 of the world's wealth met under the guise of a hunting trip. Their goal: to design a central banking system that could issue currency, regulate credit, and manage interest rates, functions once controlled by Congress. From that meeting came the blueprint for what would become the Federal Reserve System. And while it was presented as a safeguard for the economy, what it really did was transfer the power of money creation from the public to a private banking cartel. The genius, or the trick, of the system was simple. Instead of printing money backed by gold, the Federal Reserve began issuing notes backed by debt. Every time the government borrowed money, the Fed created new dollars. Every time banks issued loans, they created deposits, money that didn't exist before. It was a system that could expand infinitely, because debt had no physical limit. And so, the modern monetary engine was born. After World War I, and especially after the Great Depression, governments realized they could use this system to stimulate economies by simply borrowing and spending more. In 1944, the world gathered at Bretton Woods to create a new global order. The US dollar, backed by gold, would become the world's reserve currency. But behind the scenes, the same architects, central bankers, and finance ministers were already preparing for a post-gold world. They knew gold's limits would eventually choke growth. And when President Nixon finally severed the dollar's link to gold in 1971, money officially became an idea. Not wealth itself, but a claim on wealth. A promise made of paper, and later, pixels. Once the gold anchor was gone, the system went into overdrive. Governments could now spend beyond their means, knowing central banks would always be there to backstop the debt. This is where the infinite money mechanism truly began. The formula was simple. Government issues bonds. The central bank buys them, creating new currency. Commercial banks multiply that base money through fractional lending. It's a feedback loop of endless liquidity, money from nothing. But like any good illusion, it only works if everyone believes it. And for decades, they did. The 1980s saw deregulation, the explosion of credit markets, and the rise of derivatives. Financial weapons designed to make debt itself profitable. By the 2000s, global debt had reached $100 trillion. After the 2008 crisis, that number doubled. And by the 2020s, total global debt crossed $300 trillion. That's 3 times more money owed than the total goods and services the planet produces in a year. In other words, the world owes itself more than it can ever repay. And yet, markets keep rising, governments keep spending, central banks keep printing. Because in an infinite money system, stopping means collapse. But infinite money isn't free. It has a hidden cost, paid in purchasing power, inequality, and trust. When central banks flood markets with currency, assets inflate. The rich, who own stocks, property, and corporations, see their wealth multiply. The poor, who rely on wages, see their money buy less each year. It's not a bug. It's the system functioning exactly as designed. Inflation isn't just a side effect. It's the quiet tax that funds the illusion. And when crises hit, from 2008 to 2020, governments responded not with restraint, but with more creation. Trillions conjured overnight to stabilize economies. But stabilizing one crisis only seeds the next. Because every rescue requires more debt, and every debt makes the next rescue bigger. The architects built a machine that can never rest, because resting means collapse, and collapse means accountability. Every decade brings a new promise to fix the system. New regulations, new currencies, even talk of digital central bank money, CBDCs, as a solution. But look closely, and the pattern repeats. Each reform expands control. Each innovation strengthens central authority. In the 1980s, they called it modernization. In 2008, it was quantitative easing. In the 2020s, it's monetary innovation. Different names, same outcome, more centralized creation, less transparency, greater dependency. The architects may have changed faces, but the blueprint remains untouched. Today, the numbers are staggering. Global debt exceeds $313 trillion. Central banks collectively own over 30% of all government bonds. Nearly 80% of all US dollars in circulation were created after 2020. And yet, mainstream narratives say the economy is strong. But history whispers another story. Every empire that decoupled its currency from real value eventually faced collapse, not from invasion, but from inflation and loss of faith. The Roman denarius, the French assignat, the Weimar mark. Each followed the same pattern: overextension, devaluation, collapse, reset. The question isn't whether the current system will face a reckoning, it's when and who will control the next reset. So, what can we take away from this century-long experiment? First, money is no longer a store of value. It's a tool of control. Whoever creates it commands the world. Second, debt is the real product. Every loan, bailout, and bond sale expands the power of those who issue credit. Third, crises aren't failures, they're opportunities. Each collapse justifies more centralization, more control, and less accountability. We live inside a system designed to sustain itself through illusion, where growth is debt and stability is manipulation. But knowing the game changes how you play. The architects may have built the system, but we choose whether to keep feeding it. And as the next financial era approaches, digital currencies, programmable money, and central bank wallets, the question becomes, will you own your money, or will it own you? If you found this breakdown eye-opening, share it before the next algorithm buries it. And if you want to dig deeper into how modern finance quietly shapes your future, hit subscribe, because this story is far from over.